Hi everyone, it's April. We're back for video number 2. Now, Donald Trump is offering the mainstream media exclusive access to him in exchange for dumping this part to the story that I'm getting ready to tell you. And it's because it's going to help you understand what Pam Bondi is hiding in the Epstein files. Now, many people already know when Pam Bondi served as Florida's Attorney General, she was corrupt, just as she is now. But they just don't know how far she was willing to go in those cases. Now, I have to first walk you through how she got confirmed to be the Attorney General of the United States while she's the subject of an ongoing FBI investigation into her tampering with evidence to protect rapists. Those rapists drugged and raped me 14 years ago. Now, remember in the first video, I told you that I'm also trying to expose judges and politicians in my state who are taking bribes from prison contractors to incarcerate children from low-income families. Well, one of the things those judges and politicians did to get revenge against me was team up with Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump. Now, Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump are my enemies because they're the ones who bribed Pam Bondi to tamper with the recorded confession when I was drugged and raped, after reporting it to police and prosecutors that Pam Bondi held power over. Now, the reason the Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump are teaming up with the judges and politicians is because throughout my campaigns for judge from 2016 to 2020, I was very vocal about my experience with Pam Bondi. And the reason was because I wanted people to trust my experience, that if I get on the inside and I uncover the corruption behind the prison pipeline for the children, I will report it to the authorities. I will work with law enforcement to end it. So when they teamed up, the judges and politicians and Benjamin Crump and Daryl Parks, when they all teamed up together, their theme was to harass and torment me over what Pam Bondi did to me in Florida. And it was so bad I had to call on the authorities for help. We're going to talk about it in the next video. But for now, let me tell you a little more about what happened in Florida, and we'll get more into that later. So, as I said in the first video, I got one of the guys involved to confess while the police were recording the conversation. Now, that confession disappeared. That recording disappeared. It was swapped out for a fake where he is no longer confessing. Sounds like me, sounds like him, but that's not the conversation we had. Then they destroyed the metadata on the fake. Now, if you actually want to use a recording against a criminal defendant, you got to have that original audio file with the metadata intact. You got to be able to prove to a judge you didn't tamper with the evidence. Now, this police department was pretty bold, and they came out and told me that if they know they're never going to prosecute a case, they just immediately destroy the evidence. That's not proper police procedure now. They are giving themselves the freedom to tamper with evidence when they're bribed to do so. Well, I have phone records. And during the period of time where I'm actually waiting for a copy of the recorded confession, there's a high volume of calls among all those involved. Daryl Parks is in there. Pam Bondi's in there. Daryl Parks gives Pam Bondi a campaign donation. So what you have is a culture of bribe the prosecutor and the evidence disappeared. Now, during this time frame, Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump were representing the family of Trayvon Martin, and they were getting a lot of publicity for that. They were giving Pam Bondi publicity for that. We all know, or at least everybody's seen now, how much Pam Bondi loves publicity. I remember her going on one news outlet and bragging about how Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump were her great friends, and she was going to take really good care of them. And that she did when she tampered with the recorded confession of me being drugged and raped. Now, I went to the FBI for help, and they told me they would look into it. Then they told me there was no jurisdiction. Well, I'm an attorney. I know that. There is jurisdiction. So I went to my U.S. Senator at the time. His name is Ben Cardin. He has since retired. But he was also a member of what's called the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee investigates and vets nominees for positions within the FBI and DOJ and our federal judgeships, and they have oversight authority. Now, my senator reached out to the Department of Justice for me. We got a letter back that said, we're not saying there's insufficient evidence to prosecute this case. It's just not the type of case we want to prosecute. So my senator was bad at his job. Now, at that time, Dick Durbin, who's now the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, he was also a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee at the time that my senator reached out to the Department of Justice. This was early 2016 when we got this letter back. And they were both bad at their jobs. Neither one of them were oversighting anything. So I understood then what was going on, why I couldn't get help. But I understand it more so now, why I couldn't get help. Now, the Miami Herald wrote a very powerful series in 2018 that led to public pressure that forced the indictment of Jeffrey Epstein in New York. Now, in those series of articles, the Miami Herald reveals that police were afraid of losing their jobs if they went after Epstein. Prosecutors destroyed evidence for Epstein. So you had corruption at the local level. And then at the federal level, they talk about how the U.S. attorney at the time, Alex Acosta, offered Jeffrey Epstein a plea deal that let him get away with most of his sex crimes. He got away with all of his financial crimes. So you had corruption at the local level, you had corruption at the federal level, and there was no oversight. Dick Durbin, who is now the ranking member on the Democrat side of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he's been on this committee for 22 years. Again, they weren't oversighting anything. So now I understand. I mean, I understood it back then. I thought the system was just corrupted at every level, but now I know for sure. Let's listen to Senator Marsha Blackburn, who also sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who seems like she's actually sincere about her job as oversight over the FBI and DOJ. The very day that the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to advance Pam Bondi's nomination for the rest of the Senate to vote, let's listen to Senator Marsha Blackburn appear on Fox and talk about the importance of the Epstein files and how they're going to reveal the government corruption that covered up for the Epstein network. Let's listen to it.
And what about some of these other things that Americans are concerned about, like 9/11 files, the Epstein list?
Well, as you know, the Epstein list is something that I've worked on for a couple of years and actually tried to subpoena those and was blocked by Chairman Durbin at that point at Judiciary Committee.
I remember that.
The good thing about this is Donald Trump has listened to the American people. And as President of the United States, he made promises. He is keeping those promises. The American people want to know what is in those files. They want to know who has wronged this country. And to be able to see this will build their confidence in this administration. And I think President Trump has had a pitch-perfect week.
And I know that you continue to lead the fight on that. If you do get that list published, I think it'll be of great interest to the country.
It will help us in human trafficking in the United States.
Absolutely important. Marsha Blackburn, great state of Tennessee senator.
Senator Dick Durbin blocked her from getting the Epstein files. Of course, it's going to show you he's not doing his job. He's been on the Senate Judiciary Committee for 22 years. Epstein was offered the deal by Alex Acosta in 2007? Dick Durbin was a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee at that point in time. So what you have with the Jeffrey Epstein network was exactly what I was going through. And they were corrupt at the local level. They were corrupt at the federal level. Our senators in Washington were corrupt. They weren't doing their jobs in oversight. Now, in my situation, you have Pam Bondi, who's all the way at the top, who gets bribed, and everyone below has to fall in line. That's exactly what they went through with the Epstein network. All you had to do was bribe somebody at the top, and all these other people, the police and career prosecutors, they all fell in line. Now, the next day, after Senator Marsha Blackburn makes this appearance on Fox, is Kash Patel's confirmation hearing. I want you to hear her once again talk about what's called a two-tiered system of justice. And she is asking for Kash Patel to work with her to dismantle that system and to help her uncover the corruption that protected the Jeffrey Epstein network. Let's listen to her.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Patel, there is absolutely no doubt that you have the experience and the expertise to lead the FBI, and we welcome you here today. We are pleased that you are here. I've been listening to my colleagues across the dais and listening to their questions, and it has led me to one thing. Why are the Democrats so afraid of you?
I don't know, Senator. You'd have to ask them.
Well, I tell you what I think, and listening to their questions and your responses, which we appreciate, they know that you're going to go in and you're going to clean up that political cabal that has been over there for years. You are going to reposition the FBI to its core mission. You stated that earlier in this hearing, and there will be no more political persecutions and no more two tiers of justice. And they have liked having two tiers of justice. They have enjoyed it, and it has helped them. They think in their political mission, they've enjoyed targeting Catholics. They've enjoyed targeting parents. But the American people have said they want no more of that. And our colleagues know you're going to clean it up. I want to talk to you about the Epstein case. I have worked on this for years, trying to get those records of who flew on Epstein's plane and who helped him build this international human trafficking, sex trafficking ring. Now, earlier I urged then Chairman Durbin to subpoena those records, and I ended up being blocked by Senator Durbin and Christopher Wray. They stonewalled on this, and I know that breaking up these trafficking rings is important to President Trump. So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past and how we are going to countermand missing children and exploited children going forward.
Thank you for that.
Now, during this period of time where Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of Florida, the Epstein network is thriving. We know it's not just Epstein. It's many high-profile, wealthy, powerful men who are drugging and raping women and children. And this network is thriving while Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of Florida. She never touched anyone in that network. So why couldn't I get any attention out of the Senate Judiciary Committee? Marsha Blackburn never spoke to me. No one in the committee wanted to talk to me about my experience with Pam Bondi. And we have quite a history. Well, let's talk about the Democrats first. Now, my senator, as I told you, Ben Cardin, who sat on the Senate Judiciary Committee with Dick Durbin, who's the ranking member on the Democrat side, he reached out to Dick Durbin during Pam Bondi's confirmation process to let him know about the letter that we got back in early 2016. And I didn't hear from Dick Durbin. I reached out to his office a couple of times. They said he was concerned, but they made it clear he didn't want to talk to me. Now, the only rational explanation for why he would not confront Pam Bondi is if he was under pressure to do so. Now, there's a couple of politicians I didn't talk about in the first video that we got to talk about now. And they're absolutely critical to the corruption behind the prison pipeline. The first one is Glenn Ivey. He's my congressman. He was the elected state's attorney or elected prosecutor prior to Angela Alsobrooks. And some people will tell you that Glenn Ivey and Anthony Brown have a personal relationship. There's a friendship there. So he's the prosecutor who initially started off feeding the kids into the system. So this is the period of time where there is a mass incarceration of children on this court. And Glenn Ivey is the prosecutor who's feeding the kids into this system that his friends are all making money from. Glenn Ivey was making money too. He got something out of that. So I actually reached out to Glenn Ivey's office and I asked him if he wanted to help me with opposing Pam Bondi. Of course, he said no, but he went out of his way to campaign against Kash Patel. It was over the top. Kash Patel wrote a book about how he's going to take down all the corrupt members of Congress. Look at this.
Over to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, asking them and the other committee members to vote against Mr. Patel for FBI director. In my view, he is probably the most unqualified candidate for the FBI directorship that I've ever seen. And, there's reasons are legion. We're going to go through some of those today. And I know the Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee are likely to go ahead and vote to confirm him anyway, but I thought it was important to try and speak truth to power, and the letter is aimed at getting that done and making sure we let them know.
Held a full press conference and rallied everybody against Kash Patel. Now, Steny Hoyer, on the other hand, is another one. He's a king of Prince George's County, okay? The corruption behind the prison pipeline, it would not have went down without his approval. He is the one with the vested interest in protecting also Brooks, Glenn Ivey, Anthony Brown, and I think he was also making money somewhere too. There's things he's into that he should not be doing. He's not innocent in that prison pipeline situation. So he's going to be the one, like I said, because he's been in Congress so long, he's the one who would have the influence over Dick Durbin. They go way back. They started off in the House together. Somebody was putting pressure on Dick Durbin to ignore me. Let's talk about two other nominees that Donald Trump put forward who had a history of someone accusing them of sexual misconduct. First one, Pete Hegseth. It was all over the news. Some woman accused him of rape. It came out during his confirmation process. Okay. The next one, who is absolutely critical, is Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz was Donald Trump's first pick for Attorney General. Matt Gaetz at the time was a member of Congress. And there's actually a little bit of news coverage on this, but Matt Gaetz was investigated by the Department of Justice for having sex with a 17-year-old girl. And according to Matt Gaetz, they thoroughly investigated and he was vindicated. There was also a House ethics investigation into his conduct. And at the time that Trump nominated him, it was confidential. The Democrats were pushing for the release of the House ethics report. They said they wanted transparency in the confirmation process of the Attorney General. So, no. What you have is Steny Hoyer, who's been in Congress as long as I've been alive, Anthony Brown, former congressman, and Glenn Ivey, his best friend, who are working together to put pressure on the Democrats to force the release of the House ethics report on Matt Gaetz, because they need Matt Gaetz out of the way so Pam Bondi can be installed. They need Pam Bondi to cover up their crimes. Now, they are the ones who formed the conspiracy with Darryl Parks and Benjamin Crump to harass and torment me over the evidence tampering Pam Bondi did to me 14 years ago to cover up me being drugged and raped. And because of that conspiracy they formed, Pam Bondi can still face an indictment for what she did to me. So she's got to get in there and cover for herself. Now, Anthony Brown had inside information about the House ethics report on Matt Gaetz, because in 2021, when the House Ethics Committee launched their investigation into Matt Gaetz, he was a member of the committee. At the same time the House Ethics Committee launched their investigation, there were some news headlines that hit that Matt Gaetz was under investigation by the DOJ for having sex with a 17-year-old girl. Now, according to Matt Gaetz, the DOJ thoroughly investigated and he's been vindicated. But the House Ethics report actually makes it paints a different story. It actually makes it look like he's part of the Epstein network. Now, again, Anthony Brown was a member of the committee at the time that investigation was launched. He was replaced in Congress by Glenn Ivey, his partner in crime, who also needs Pam Bondi there. And not only was he replaced by him in Congress, he also replaced him on his seat on the House Ethics Committee. So at the time of Pam Bondi's confirmation process, Glenn Ivey has inside information of the status of that investigation into Matt Gaetz. So they are all working together to make sure they put that the Democrats who say they want transparency in the Attorney General confirmation process, which is all lies, they don't. It's these three Democrats that are pushing their colleagues to help them install Pam Bondi to cover up their crimes. Let's read Marjorie Taylor Greene's social media post on X. She said on December 5th, 2024, I voted no to the Democrats' effort to release the Matt Gaetz report. So I'll post this again. The original post was on November 19, 2024. For my Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate, if we're going to release the ethics report and rip apart our own that Trump has appointed, then put it all out there for the American people to see. Yes, all the ethics reports and claims, including the one I filed, all your sexual harassment and assault claims that were secretly settled paying off victims with taxpayer money, the entire Jeffrey Epstein files, tapes, recordings, witness interviews, but not just those, there's more. Epstein wasn't and isn't the only asset. If we're going to dance, let's dance in the sunlight. I'll make sure we do. There you have it. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is the one who rallied enough Republicans to push the release of the Epstein files. She's fighting for herself. She's fighting for Matt Gaetz. She wants vindication for Matt Gaetz. I think they made it look like he was a part of the Epstein network. And when I say they, I mean the House ethics report that was released and made it appear that he was, he was a part of the Epstein network. So she's fighting for vindication for him. She's fighting for the survivors of the Epstein network. And it is her determination that rallied enough members on the Republican side to push for the release of the Epstein files. So there you have it. The Democrats made sure everything they could find on Matt Gaetz came out. Matt Gaetz ended up withdrawing his nomination, resigning from Congress, and the report still came out. So the Democrats fought for transparency when Matt Gaetz was nominated, but buried Pam Bondi's past. And that's why I say when something like that happens, somebody is using their influence and they're doing this purposely. And let's talk about what happened on the Republican side of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I didn't talk to anyone, but they made it very clear that they were fully aware of my history with Pam Bondi, and they were supportive of whatever corruption Pam Bondi was going to bring in that place. They replaced one of their members with newly appointed United States Senator Ashley Moody. Ashley Moody is the daughter to the judge, Jim Moody, who presided over my lawsuit against Parks and Crump for bribing Pam Bondi to tamper with the recorded confession, and he threw that part of the lawsuit out because Pam Bondi was raising substantial amounts of money for his daughter to replace her as the Attorney General of Florida. Now, my case actually started in Maryland and got transferred down to Florida, and they just made sure it went to a judge that Pam Bondi was bribing. That's what happened on the Republican side. Of course, the Republicans aren't going to take me seriously if the Democrats are all for the corruption. But the difficult part I'm having to reconcile here is Marsha Blackburn, who actually seems like she cares about her authority as oversight. And she really wants to investigate the Epstein network, but Pam Bondi is key. She is extremely important. So when I couldn't get any help from the Senate Judiciary Committee, I reached out to the media. I reached out to ABC because they covered my termination from the judiciary without even reaching out to me for comment. But this was months before, and they told me they were going to let me tell my side, but I decided I would come back when the time was right. Well, Pam Bondi's confirmation process, the time was right. Because the Maryland Judiciary, in their reasons for firing me, actually said that they were firing me for speaking out about what Pam Bondi did to me. I'll read it to you. It says, in her blog post, so in 2020, when I was running for judge, I wrote a blog post detailing what I just told you happened with Pam Bondi and Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump. And it's on my website if you want to look at it. It's dated April 1st, 2020. So let me read this to you. In her blog post, among other things, Judge Demalui stated that the police and prosecutors destroy and fabricate evidence to cover up the drug rapes. In addition to claiming that the police and prosecutors destroy and fabricate evidence to cover up drug rapes, Judge Demalui stated that she had endured years of abuse from police, prosecutors, and judges who literally put the justice system up for sale to rapists. Such statements could easily cause a reasonable person to infer that once elected, Judge Demalui would not be impartial in handling rape cases, or that she would be biased against the police and prosecutor in such cases. So in other words, I would be biased against the victim and biased in favor of those who are accused of rape. It's not supposed to make sense. It's just supposed to be revenge. So remember, these judges have formed an alliance with Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump to harass and torment me over what Pam Bondi did to me. We're going to get into it in the next video about all the things they were doing that forced law enforcement to have to go back to looking into what Pam Bondi did to me 14 years ago. Now, these are judges who have been getting away with criminal activity for a long time. They think they're above the law. They think they're untouchable. They think if they all gang up on me, there's no way any of them are going to go down. And politicians, on the other hand, Angela Alsobrooks, Glenn Ivey, Steny Hoyer, Anthony Brown, they were afraid of the Joe Biden Justice Department. And if you think about it, the Joe Biden Justice Department prosecuted Joe Biden's son. They prosecuted Marilyn Mosby. So they're scared. And when Donald Trump comes in, Pam Bondi is her only way out because she could be charged too with what she did to me 14 years ago. From day one, the clock was ticking. As you can see, they were always going to get rid of me. And I had two objectives. The first one was work really hard on whatever cases God wants me to see while I'm in there. And the other one was uncover the corruption and report it to the authorities and work with the authorities to make sure they're all held accountable for their crimes. Let's go back to ABC. ABC, let's keep in mind who they are. They interviewed one of Prince Andrew's accusers, sat on the interview for years. The network refused to air it. And according to the anchor who did the interview, the palace threatened ABC 1,000 different ways. And that's why they wouldn't air the interview. So since the release of the Epstein files, Prince Andrew has lost his title. He's under investigation. He's been arrested. So I suspect ABC was threatened 1,000 different ways again because I was asking them to expose the Epstein queen and they ignored me. Now, Fox, on the other hand, Fox was actually covering my story, allowing me to get my side out up until Pam Bondi was nominated. And as everyone can see, the Trump administration controls Fox. But that actually ended up working out in my favor because Fox gave Pam Bondi just enough airtime to hang herself on the Epstein files. So I want you to hear from a survivor of the Epstein network who spoke to a reporter who wrote that Miami Herald series that I talked about earlier that created the public pressure that led to the indictment of Jeffrey Epstein in New York. And this survivor's statement is important because it helps you understand why it's absolutely critical that the Department of Justice hold all those involved in the corruption behind the prison pipeline accountable for their crimes. Not only the people that were making money from it, but even the people that covered for them. Everybody involved should be held accountable for their crimes. Let me read it to you. It says, the Miami Herald analyzed thousands of pages of court records and lawsuits, witness depositions, and newly released FBI documents, and also identified more than 80 women who say they were victimized. They are scattered around the country and abroad. Until now, those victims today in their late 20s and early 30s have never spoken publicly about how they felt shamed, silenced, and betrayed by the very people in the criminal justice system who were supposed to hold Epstein accountable. So one victim said, how come people who don't have money get sent to jail and can't even make bail, and they have to do their time and sit there and think about what they did wrong? He had no repercussions and doesn't even believe he did anything wrong, said Lakita, now 30 years old. So I told my story because I wanted people to trust that if I uncover the corruption behind the prison pipeline, I will report it to the authorities. I will work with the authorities to make sure all those involved are held accountable for their crimes. Glenn Ivey, Steny Hoyer, Anthony Brown, Angela Alsobrooks, they think Pam Bondi had no choice. She's got to cover for herself, and in turn, she covers for them. And if, in fact, they did pressure Dick Durbin to suppress my history, somebody did, and they're the only ones who could have done it. It's obstruction of justice. It's a crime. Let's talk about the Epstein files. We've all seen how broad they are. They have everyone Epstein took pictures with, everyone Epstein communicated with, journalists who were studying Epstein or reporting on Epstein, they're in the files. These files are very broad. Now, anybody Pam Bondi did dirt for, remember the Epstein network is wealthy and powerful people, anybody she did dirt for that knew or communicated with Epstein is going to be in the files. What she did for these people is going to be in the files. But Pam Bondi had no idea, A, how broad these files are, or what people were saying to the FBI about her. If the FBI is not going to arrest you, they don't tell you what people say about you. There is no way Pam Bondi could have known what was in those files, and she's never worked for the feds. There were two very brave journalists last summer. This was, July of 2025, when Pam Bondi came out and said she wasn't giving up any Epstein files. The whole thing's a hoax. Let's move on from the Epstein files. That came out and said the problem is her history. She has a history of protecting the Epstein network. Let's listen to the very first journalist.
Here's an important reminder about the Epstein files. The person who withheld them in the first place has been failing the victims in this case for years. I've been covering Attorney General Pam Bondi since she began her rise in Florida back in the 2010s. The first thing to know about her is that she built her political brand around protecting victims of sex trafficking.
I say children, but we know it's young adults, it's boys, it's girls, it's teens are being abducted.
Bondi was Florida's Attorney General from 2011 to 2019 as lawsuits piled up from Epstein's victims challenging his secret plea deal. At that time, prosecutors had not only made Epstein immune from further prosecution, they also illegally hid the agreement from his victims, so they couldn't fight the deal in court. Now, Bondi was elected after Epstein had served his sentence in Palm Beach County Jail, and she quickly tried to establish her office as an advocate for victims of sex trafficking. She erected billboards across the state, created the statewide Council on Human Trafficking, and investigated allegations of past sex abuse by Catholic priests. But Bondi kept her distance from Epstein, even as the victims of the disgraced financier filed lawsuit after lawsuit, alleging he abused them when he was on work release from jail and pleaded with the courts to invalidate provisions of his non-prosecution agreement. But as these cases piled up, Bondi did nothing. Years later, when Trump handpicked Bondi to lead the Justice Department, she got a second chance to rectify this damage. She didn't use it. Bondi could have released the Epstein files as she promised. She could have conducted a sweeping internal probe of how the sweetheart deal happened. Instead, she pointed fingers and even bragged that Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on her desk. She also destroyed every last ounce of independence her office might have had when she warned Trump that his name appeared in the files. Bondi's inaction helped to perpetuate what victims have described as a government cover-up that has robbed them of a chance at justice. Her long track record on this case raises another question, too. Since she doesn't appear to be protecting Epstein's victims, who is she protecting?
Pam Bondi is protecting herself. So the other journalist who was brave enough to call out Pam Bondi was Laura Loomer. She made it very clear that the problem with the Epstein files is Pam Bondi's hiding her own horrible past. Laura Loomer's from Florida, so she is very familiar with Pam Bondi. And she also has a personal relationship with Donald Trump. So she was pleading with Donald Trump to fire Pam Bondi. And we're thankful for what Laura Loomer did. She was very aggressive. But that's it. Those two. Everybody else shied away from calling out Pam Bondi. Mainstream media wouldn't even talk about how she was the Attorney General of Florida for 8 years, had jurisdiction to prosecute the Epstein network, and never touched them. Now, this brings us back to Senator Marsha Blackburn, because I'm still trying to reconcile how she treated me with her objectives of wanting to uncover the corruption that protected the Epstein network, knowing that Pam Bondi never touched the Epstein network. She knew the heat that Pam Bondi got in Florida for refusing to touch the Epstein network. She knew the bad reputation Pam Bondi had in Florida for protecting the Epstein network. I want you to listen to an independent journalist confront Senator Marsha Blackburn last summer after Pam Bondi figures out what's in the Epstein files.
Should the Epstein files be released to the public? Senator, why are you standing in front of me? Senator Blackburn, should the Epstein files be released to the public? Your guy is pushing me, and I know a lot of your constituents. Senator, should the Epstein files be released to the public? Do you believe what President Trump is saying, that Obama and Biden are the responsible parties for the Epstein files? Why are you pushing me? That is so rude. My pastor is really good friends with you, Senator Blackburn, so I'd appreciate it if you would answer for Americans the truth. Should the Epstein files be released? Senator Blackburn? A lot of her constituents know the kind of journalism that I do, and they want to know the truth about the Epstein files. Have you ever seen any of them? Senator Blackburn, have you ever seen any of the Epstein files? Or are you going to stand with President Trump and not want them to be released to the public? What do you think? Senator Blackburn? So he's pushing me. So I'm a very independent journalist, but I'm also a mother. And American patriots want the Epstein files released. How do you feel about that, Senator Blackburn? And that's how really rude senators behave. That is so completely disrespectful and rude. And this is how mainstream media acts. They just sit there. Okay, Senator Blackburn, I'm going to release this footage because you've been so rude today and not answering any questions, and I'm a mom just like you're a mom. A lot of my viewers, why are you pushing me in her? You're willing to do this for money? You don't believe in First Amendment free press?
So I think Senator Marsha Blackburn was just putting on a show. She never had any interest in uncovering anything in the Epstein network. She just wanted to look good. She wanted to make it look like she cared. But, after the way I was treated, I assure you, they don't care about the Epstein network. The Senate Judiciary Committee does not care about justice for the survivors of the Epstein network. They were both sides of the aisle were fine with Pam Bondi being in that position. So it's not a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to Epstein, failed. So I want you to listen to a Florida congressman by the name of Jared Moskowitz.
Well, first of all, I love the letter, right? Possible mismanagement?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it was mismanaged. I mean, first of all, let's just go back down Epstein memory lane for a second. Right. First, she gave the binders to the influencers. Then the list was on her desk. Then there was no list, maybe no desk, in fact. Okay. Then it went. then it went from this is a Democratic hoax. We can't release any of this. They told Republicans not to sign on to the bill. If they signed on to it, it was a hostile act against the White House. Then they brought Republican members into the Situation Room. The place where we go to war. Right, and basically promised them things in their district, threatened them. Pam Bondi was in those meetings. Okay, in the Situation Room. And so, let's not have the most transparent, administration in American history. They tried to cover this up and keep this from ever coming out. And it only was because Congress pushed it on them that we are where we are.
Did you hear that? The Pam Bondi was in these meetings. They did not want to sign the Epstein Transparency Act. They didn't want to release any documents. They were bribing and bullying members of Congress. That's the Pam Bondi I know. That's the Pam Bondi that was bribing the judge to dismiss my lawsuit against her. That's the Pam Bondi that I've been dealing with the last 14 years. Now, all the members of Congress, they all know Pam Bondi figured out she was in those files, but they're not saying it. Either they're afraid, they're being bullied, bribed. Now, Congressman Ro Khanna, he could be a little more straightforward. I guess he doesn't have so much to fear. I want you to hear what he said.
Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, actually has come out and publicly criticized, as you know, in Vanity Fair today, an interview, criticized the Attorney General Pam Bondi, specifically over her handling of the Epstein files. Wiles said that Bondi, quote, completely whiffed, giving, quote, binders full of nothingness to right-wing influencers. And then she said, Congressman, Trump is in the file, and we know he's in the file. And he's not in the file doing anything awful. They were, sort of young, single, whatever. I know it's a sort of passé word, but sort of young, single playboys together. I guess there's a lot there. What do you say to that? And do you think they're just setting it up that Pam Bondi's the one to take the fall?
Well, look, Susie Wiles is a serious person. Donald Trump wouldn't have won the White House if it weren't for Susie Wiles. And she's basically acknowledging the reality, which is that Pam Bondi has messed this up. She basically has misled the American people. They should have released the files. She's mishandled it. Susie Wiles knows politics. She knows that what Thomas Massie and I did split the MAGA coalition in a way that has never been split before. She knows that was the spark that has led to more Republicans now defying the president. And she's understandably frustrated that Pam Bondi has really led to the unraveling in part of the Trump presidency because she botched the release of the Epstein files. In terms of the Playboy, look, this is not about people being Playboys or being single. This is about the rape of underage girls. So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about. No one is saying someone is a Playboy, someone is out womenizing, someone is having affairs. We're talking about a rape island where underage girls were abused. And this is not to be conflated with being a Playboy. And so I just think that that kind of language doesn't really do justice to the survivors who face extraordinary trauma.
Well, clearly and eloquently said.
So there you have it. The Republicans are running and breaking from Trump because Pam Bondi figured out she was in the files. You can imagine how hard they're all sweating because they not only did they disrespect me during her confirmation process, they tried to cover it up. They didn't want it to get out what I went through with Pam Bondi. I didn't get to tell any of them about me trying to expose the judges and politicians in my state who are taking bribes from the prison contractors, some of which are members of Congress. I didn't have that conversation with them. I didn't get to talk to any of them about that. But they tried to cover up what Pam Bondi did to me. They had no problems throwing Matt Gaetz under the bus. Pete Hegseth's problems came out in the media, but Pam Bondi went above and beyond to cover up what was going on between me and her. Now, you can imagine how hard they're all sweating to find out she's in the files and other people are complaining about the same thing I'm complaining about, okay? It's not a partisan issue. You know, on the Democrat side, you got Dick Durbin, who's been on the Senate Judiciary Committee for 22 years. He was never doing his job as oversight. The Epstein network flourished because of people like Dick Durbin. And then on the right side, Marsha Blackburn, she wasn't doing anything. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, they weren't oversighting anything. The Epstein network thrived because of people like them on both sides of the aisle. Now, remember when Pam Bondi testified before the House Judiciary Committee? They did a really good job of showing how cruel she is towards victims of sexual assault. The Pam Bondi that I've been dealing with. The cruel woman that I have been fighting for the last 14 years. They brought out her personality. Let me at least show you that part. Remember this?
They are talking about Epstein today. This has been around since the Obama administration. This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million. And Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history. And none of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings booming. That's what we should be talking about.
What about this? None of them had the courage to confront her with the fact that she was the Florida Attorney General for 8 years. She had jurisdiction to prosecute the Epstein network, and she never did. None of them asked her, is your name in the files? None of them asked her, is anybody accusing you of doing something wrong in those files? None of them had the courage to ask her that. Did you hear what she said to Congressman Jamie Raskin? She said, I hear you're a great stock trader. She's insinuating that she has evidence on him insider trading. And what she's saying is, you better not think about outing me because I will expose you. Let's listen to Congressman Tim Burchett explain how insider trading is a huge problem among members of Congress.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Brian. Somebody asked me if I was going to wear my jacket up there, and I said, to quote the immortal words of Henry Winkler when he played the Fonz, I always rumble in this jacket, because that's what we're up against. This is a fist fight, folks. Now, first, I guess I need to thank Chairman Stiles and the committee, the House Administration Committee, for taking this up, because I realize what we're up against. I mean, this is, everybody talks about this place being a dadgum swamp. It's not a swamp. A swamp is something cool God created. It filters water. Animal life lives and flourishes around it. This is a sewer. This is created by man, and it needs to stop. We've, for years, Congress has been using hard-working American taxpayers' money to get rich. Dadgum, it's got to stop. America knows what the heck's going on. Everybody wants to knock Pelosi. Heck, she's not even in the top 10. Get on that Unusual Whales site. This is pathetic, folks. We all know what's going on. Congress knows what the hell's going on, and it needs to stop. This body has been enriching itself on the taxpayers' dime for too dadgum long, and it's got to stop. This place is crooked, and is crooked as a dog's leg. That's an old East Tennessee saying, but it's the truth, and it needs to stop. America knows what's going on. We're in committee meetings. We hear things before y'all do. We can make those connections. When you see a member of this body making 400, 500, 600 trades a year, you know something's wrong. Everybody ought to do like I do. I got my buddy Tommy Siler who invested in my mutual fund. I ended up having to cash it out because my daughter's going to school. I'm not a wealthy man. But look, this thing is broken, and it needs to be fixed, and this is the right avenue to do it. And I want to say something. I'm going to get these guys mad at me, but I really don't care because they can't vote in my district. This thing ain't going to pass. If we're going to pass something in the House, and then guess what? The Senate will either, one, not take it up, or they'll come back in righteous indignation and say, oh, we need to make this stronger, something totally ridiculous, and they'll send it back to us. This is a scam that's being played on the American public, and it needs to stop. Let's quit with this nonsense. Let's give America a reason to trust Congress for once in our miserable lives. This is our chance to stand up and say, we hear what you're saying, America. We're going to fix this dadgum problem. But we probably won't do it. And I'll remain ticked off the rest of the day because of this. And it needs to stop. I want to thank all these folks, really. I joke around about it. You want to talk about something that, we all working together? Dadgummit, this is the issue. This is the issue where Democrats and Republicans. Dadgummit, if I can stand up here with these two. Yeah, these two. I mean, people back in East Tennessee are going, what in the heck's Burchett doing sitting next to Proud Paul, for goodness sakes? Well, I'm not going to beat her in her district, and she sure as heck ain't going to come down to East Tennessee and beat me. But this is an issue that America's united on. We ought to get behind this thing. You all in the press, it would make a hell of a lot of sense if y'all would put the pressure on Congress and make us do the right thing for once in our miserable lives.
So it's no coincidence Pam Bondi's there. I'm in this huge fight with Darryl Parks and Benjamin Crump over what they did to me 14 years ago. I'm in this fight with the judges and politicians in my state. I have no regrets in trying to expose the corruption behind the prison pipeline. And they're all working together to get Pam Bondi in this position because she's her only way out, or at least they see her as the only way out, because she has to protect herself. Now, the question becomes, why did Donald Trump put Pam Bondi in this position? Did he know all these things? I don't know how much Donald Trump knew during Pam Bondi's confirmation process. I'm sure he knows it all now. She's in this compromised position. She thinks the feds are coming after her because of what Darryl Parks and Benjamin Crump are doing with the judges and politicians in my state. She thinks she may go down. So she's in this position because she thinks she's going to keep her out of jail or keep the feds from investigating her. And again, the question is, well, why did Donald Trump keep her there for so long, especially after everybody was so upset over the Epstein files? I want you to listen to Ro Khanna one more time when he talks about Susie Wiles.
Well, look, Susie Wiles is a serious person. Donald Trump wouldn't have won the White House if it weren't for Susie Wiles.
So there you have it, Susie Wiles. very important person. She is Trump's chief of staff. Trump would not have made it to the White House without her. Susie Wiles is also former managing partner of two major lobbying firms, that's Ballard Partners and Mercury Public Affairs. And the client list of those lobbying firms are major corporations, foreign countries, with lots of money. And as long as Pam Bondi was willing to cater to those clients, that is building Susie Wiles' business and wealth and power, she was protected. And I'll give you a couple examples. She obstructed the investigation into the mayor of New York City. Actually, that case was ready to go to trial. She dismissed that case. So the mayor of New York City was actually accused of taking bribes from Turkish officials. Turkey's on the client list. That's why she got in the middle of that case. You got Pfizer. She obstructed the investigations into Pfizer's corruption. You got, Venezuela. She promised immunity to those who assisted in blowing up the ships that allegedly had the drugs on them. She indicted the president of Venezuela to facilitate with a U.S.-controlled regime change, all to benefit the clients. So as long as Pam Bondi is making the clients of Susie Wiles happy, she had the powerhouse behind her, protecting her, threatening the senators, bribing the senators, telling them they're going to be, the White House is going to treat them hostile if they sign on to the Epstein Transparency Act. All this stuff they're going through, controlling mainstream media. That's why they're doing all that for her. Now, Trump finally found the courage to fire her. Now, does this mean he's going to uphold his campaign promise and hold the Epstein class accountable? Because Pam Bondi is the Epstein class. And so the Democrats are ready to fix their mistake. They drafted articles of impeachment. They have a subpoena for her deposition. The Republicans, on the other hand, they're still playing games. Donald Trump tried to make it look like the Clintons were the problem. The Oversight Committee subpoenaed the Clintons to testify about their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And the Clintons wrote a nice little letter to the committee telling them, why are you picking on us? Why don't you focus on investigating the system that failed these women and girls? But they can't do that because that system's Pam Bondi. So they got to depose Bill and Hillary. It didn't work out too well for them, but they got what they wanted. And I really think that push to embarrass Bill and Hillary probably helped or pushed the Democrats to push a little harder in pushing Pam Bondi out of there. I mean, she's done a lot of damage in that place. I'm not sure exactly what led to the articles of impeachment, but we're going to listen to Congresswoman Summer Lee explain to us why she filed the articles of impeachment. She finally said, she was the first one, she finally said, Pam Bondi's covering for herself. Let's listen to her.
So I just walked out of a fake deposition, fake hearing with Pam Bondi, where Chairman Comer called me a bitch. So here's what actually happened. We had already subpoenaed her because she has not been in compliance with our subpoena and the Epstein Transparency Act to release the full, complete, unredacted Epstein files. She has been withholding them. She has been obstructing justice since last July. And a couple weeks ago, we finally got bipartisan support to subpoena her, to bring her into our committee to ask questions. Now, today's attempt, sham of a hearing, was your attempt to bypass that. Multiple times we asked her if she would come in and she would talk to our committee on the record, under oath, in the public. She refused to do so. So instead of directing any more questions to her where she's not under oath, where she can continue to lie to us, I directed my questions to our chairman to see if he would compel her to comply with the subpoena that he signed and that he issued. He could not respond. I asked him if she did not come, if he would hold her in contempt, move with contempt proceedings like he did with other people who he said did not comply with our subpoenas. And instead of answering this simple question with a yes, of course, he said that I was bitching and that I was wasting his time and that we didn't have to talk about this anymore. So that's where we are. That's why we are trying to move to impeach her. That's why we introduced those articles of impeachment, because it is clear that she has no intention on cooperating with Congress. She has no intention of cooperating with the American people. She is not seeking justice for survivors or anyone else. She is there to run cover for Donald Trump, for his allies, and for herself. And it's time that we get her out of there.
So well said. And I hope that that is what led to her filing the articles of impeachment. And Congresswoman Nancy Mace, she's on the Republican side, and she's been very aggressive too. She made it very clear she had no faith in the Department of Justice. So, but Donald Trump fired her. He had to fire her. I mean, she's a political liability. The truth about her is going to come out. Her history is going to come out. But again, you could just imagine how hard she's sweating, and everybody else is sweating who worked hard to make sure that my past with Pam Bondi remains hidden. And it all just blew up in their faces. So I did go to the Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee and tell them what was going on with the judges and politicians in my state and how Pam Bondi can't be the Attorney General of the United States with that case. I mean, the DOJ can't pursue that case while Pam Bondi is there. She's implicated in that case. And they tried to give her an exit ramp. They tried to make it look like she was just too overwhelmed in her work. They had some of their media outlets that they control create stories about her just being overwhelmed in her work, reporting on things that are months old. They tried to get her out in a very soft way. It didn't work. Of course, she's not going to go anywhere. She thinks the only thing that's standing in between her and being prosecuted is being in that position. She's there to obstruct justice. That's why she's there. In exchange for her being protected or shielded from any kind of prosecution for her own crimes. So no, she's not going to just go. Now, the hold on the media that they have is overwhelming. The New York Times was important to my story because, as I told you in the first video, they were the ones who covered mass incarceration of the children on my court. They wrote a story about a judge who was hell-bent on increasing the number of kids and the length of stay in juvenile detention. And I went to them late last year to see if they wanted to run this story. And I told them, I said, Donald Trump's going to offer you an exclusive in exchange for dumping this story. And he fights them really hard. They had a lawsuit pending at that time because Donald Trump deprived them of access to the Pentagon press corps. And of course they caved. The press secretary had announced that, the New York Times now has Donald Trump's cell phone number. So I understand. I understand why it seems like winning the lottery. But this guy is a PR magician, and it was a trap. The Trump administration is just going to use the New York Times to lie to people. Pam Bondi used the New York Times to craft a story about how she's getting death threats from people upset about the Epstein files and the drug cartel members who are allegedly working for Maduro, and that would be the president of Venezuela, who she indicted. And the timing of it was right after I started talking about on my social media how I was getting death threats from the judges and politicians when I was talking about the connection between the judges and the prison contractors. And I started getting these death threats on social media. And I talk about how Pam Bondi is protecting you now, but she certainly can't, she's not going to change your destiny. And shortly thereafter, she gets the New York Times to print this article. She's a textbook abuser, playing the victim. This is the Pam Bondi that I've been dealing with the last 14 years. She is a cruel, abusive, sick human being. And it's unfortunate that their hold on the media now allows them to not only use the media to lie, but to tell one side of the story. Well, what have we learned? That when you are useful to members of Congress, they're willing to cover up your dirt and your crimes. And we're seeing that all play out with Eric Swalwell. Now, members of Congress were fully aware of his history of sexual misconduct complaints, but because he was useful to them, they were willing to hide it or cover it up. Now, that's exactly what happened with Pam Bondi. On the Republican side of the Senate Judiciary Committee, they had a lot of pressure from two of the most powerful lobbying firms in D.C., that's Ballot Partners and Mercury Public Affairs. And as I said, Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, she was managing partner of both firms. Now, those lobbying firms are putting pressure on the Republicans So she's useful to the Republicans. Now, those lobbying firms are also the powerhouse that is helping her bribe and blackmail members of Congress to back off from the Epstein files, to suppress my story, because it's going to help people understand what she's hiding in the Epstein files. She also had them at their disposal to help her with the Republicans forcing the release of the House ethics report on Matt Gaetz. So on the Republican side, she's useful. So she's got that power and that support behind her. And on the Democrat side, same thing. I suspect that Dick Durbin was fully aware of what was going on between me and the members of Congress in my state, that Steny Hoyer, Angela Alsobooks, Glenn Ivey, and Anthony Brown. And Steny Hoyer and Dick Durbin go way back. They started off in the House together. So I suspect Dick Durbin knew everything that was going on. But these Democrats were useful to him. So he was willing to suppress my story to help Pam Bondi get through. And I can't say all the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee know, or even, the Democrats in the House. Maybe some of them did know because of their relationships there with the members of Congress in my state. But bottom line, these 4 Democrats were useful to Dick Durbin. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee were willing to suppress my history with Pam Bondi. Now, it ended up blowing up in all their faces because of the Epstein files. They underestimated the power of the Epstein files. Now, they were fully aware of Pam Bondi's history with the Epstein network. She had never prosecuted them. She's hated in Florida, but they did not understand how powerful those files were to Trump's supporters. And Pam Bondi made 2 of the biggest mistakes. Number one, she didn't realize how broad the files were and that her own problems could be in there. And of course, if the FBI is not going to arrest you, they don't tell you what people say about you. So she had no way of knowing what people say about her to the FBI. So we're going to talk more in the next video about the conspiracy between Daryl Parks and Benjamin Crump that created that opportunity for Pam Bondi to face an indictment for the evidence tampering she did to cover me being drugged and raped 14 years ago. And the judges and politicians in my state, they didn't actually complete their plans, but they still committed the crime. And I suspect that they withdrew or ditched their plans because while Michael Pearson was testifying, there were a lot of people in the room. And I suspect that they believe that some of those people sitting behind me were law enforcement officials. So they got nervous and dumped their plans. But we're going to talk more about that in the next video. Now, even though Pam Bondi is no longer the Attorney General, she's still protected by that powerhouse, those lobbying firms that she did a lot of dirt for while she was the Attorney General of the United States. She's still using them to put pressure on media and members of Congress to cover up her own crimes, to cover up what's in the Epstein files. Now, during her confirmation process for Attorney General, even your Epstein Protector Network, ABC, ran the story about how the Democrats wanted transparency in the Attorney General confirmation process. That's why they were pushing the House Ethics Committee to release the ethics report on Matt Gaetz. Now, we know that's not true because ABC ran a story about me being terminated without reaching out to me for comment. They told me they would let me tell my side to the story when the time was right. I was terminated for speaking out about what the Epstein Queen did to me. That's the evidence tampering she did to cover up me being drugged and raped 14 years ago. Her confirmation process was the time to talk about that story, and ABC would not talk to me. But yet they were willing to lie to the American people about the Democrats wanting transparency in the Attorney General process, which they knew was not true. So, or maybe one other reporter, the reporter that did that story didn't know anything about me. I don't know. But there was definitely an active cover-up from ABC to suppress why I was fired, to suppress my history with the Epstein Queen. We'll talk more in the next video about that conspiracy that created an opportunity for Pam Bondi to face the indictment for what she did to me 14 years ago. Now, the FBI doesn't talk about investigations. I don't know what they're doing. If they're doing anything, I don't, they're not going to tell you anything. They certainly wouldn't have told the Senate Judiciary Committee anything. I don't know what's going on there, but I want to make sure that I keep you informed. So now I want to introduce you to my partnership with Nature Made Vitamins and Supplements. I've been taking Nature Made Vitamins and Supplements every day for decades. I take their probiotics, I take their magnesium, I take their flaxseed oil, I take their multivitamins. They are the #1 pharmacist recommended brand. I've tried many other brands. This is the brand that works for me. And now my partnership with them allows me to offer you their products at competitive prices. That's no additional charge to you. But here's the important part. You have to purchase the products through the links that I provide to you, either on my website or on my social media. It's just going to route you to the Nature Made website. But in order for me to get credit for the sale, you got to start with the links that I provide to you. And what these sales are going to do is give me the opportunity to get this story out to Trump's supporters, Trump's enemies, everybody. Everybody needs to know what's going on. You know, this is going to allow me to bring out the truth that Trump's unlawful control over media has been suppressing from everyone. So grab whatever it is you need for your health. Follow me. I'm going to keep you informed. And until next time.